Good evening again. Thank you very much for taking time out of your night tonight to come here. And thanks to the First United Methodist Church here for allowing us to use their facility. This is the public hearing for the Sarpy Southwest Transmission Project. Like we're posted here, this is being broadcast, simulcast via our WebEx. So for those that didn't want to attend in person here, they are able to see this via WebEx. We're also going to be recording this and posting at least the presentation portion onto OPPD Community Connect. So anybody who missed this presentation or wants to see it again can see it there. So the agenda for tonight, we'll go over some introductions, the safety, and then get into the actual purpose of the hearing. So to start it off, my name is Shane Hansen. I'm the manager of transmission engineering here at OPPD, and I'm also the project manager for this Sarpy Southwest Transmission Project. With me presenting tonight, I've got Mark Pohl, who's the supervisor of land management, and Brian Wall, who's a senior engineer in transmission engineering. Also in the room with us, we have Danny Belt, who's the project sponsor and director of engineering, Troy Vai, who's our executive project sponsor and the vice president of energy delivery. And then we have Javier Fernandez, the president and CEO of OPPD here in attendance as well. Javier, if you'd like to come up and say a few words.
This is a microphone?
Yeah.
Okay, well, hopefully you all can hear me. Thank you so much for coming. I know that you probably have a lot of things to do this evening, and you took time to come here with us, and we're grateful for that. I hope we have a good discussion today. I hope you learn good information, and we're able to share information with you. I would like to introduce tonight with us, we have one of our elected officials, Mr. Rick Yoder, who is our board member representing subdivision 4, which is Sarpy County, most of Sarpy County. And Lisa Olson, who is our vice president of public affairs, is the only other member of our executive team. Thank you to the OPPD team for being here, taking so much time preparing this event. Looking forward to all the information we're going to have, and back to you, Shane.
Thank you, sir. Okay, and obviously you'll see a lot of other OPPD shirts. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go through and introduce everyone. We have subject matter experts representing kind of all walks of these projects. So, during the Q&A or afterwards in breakout sessions, you'll be able to ask additional follow-up questions, and we can kind of point you to the right subject matter expert that can help answer that. So again, the purpose of this hearing tonight is to walk over the project overview. This is required by Nebraska State Statute, Article 25. Mark will get into that further in further slides, but really to talk about this project overview, really to focus in on the property owner rights associated with this project, walk through the construction steps that we'll be seeing with the transmission project, and then get into the comments and Q&A in a public forum here. To start it off, though, we do want to give a quick safety briefing. So again, we are at the First United Methodist Church here. So we do have a couple of evacuation routes in the event that we do need to evacuate. Obviously, the main door we all came in here on the east side of the building is the primary one. However, there is an exit out to the front of the fellowship hall, and then also through the kitchen if needed, and to the left. Restrooms are actually located over here to the back of the room and to the left. That's also where we have first aid, AED, and a fire extinguisher. There's also a fire extinguisher on this wall here. In the event of inclement weather that requires us to shelter, past the restrooms here, there's stairs that lead down to the basement. That is where the shelter for a tornado event would occur. We have a member of our OPPD corporate security, Randy Bland, here in the back of the room. In the event of a medical emergency, Randy would take point on calling 911, administering first aid CPR. He'll also be our liaison for any other evacuation event or calling of 911 that needs to happen. Okay. All right, so this is one thing that we like to lead all of our public meetings. We obviously have a great audience in attendance, lots of participants. So we just ask that we all be kind and courteous to the others in the room. Just letting everybody be heard, their questions heard and answered, hopefully. And just the reminder that there is going to be that ability for us to break out, talk to the right-of-way coordinators or managers, project managers, executive sponsors of the project as well afterwards. So that's where after this presentation, we'll have a Q&A in this large group and then break out. So for those participating in person here, you obviously have the ability to raise your hand, ask your question. Since we are doing this via WebEx, I'll repeat your question and answer it, or have a subject matter expert come up to assist in answering the question. For those participating online, we have the Q&A feature that they'll be able to type their question in. I'll read off their question and answer it. And unfortunately, if there are people just calling in by phone, they're not going to be able to see any of this information. So we asked that they can call in to the OPPD Land Management Hotline, 531-226-3062. And that's not just for the folks that are on the call. If there are any questions that you have and you don't have the exact right-of-way coordinator's contact information, you can always call that, leave a voicemail, and they will return your call in the couple of days following this public hearing. They're usually pretty quick about it, but give them at least a business day to respond to calls. And you know, again, I mentioned it, we are recording this, and the presentation itself will be posted on OPPD Community Connect in the next day or two following this public hearing. Okay, so the Sarpy Southwest Transmission Project is part of the larger Power with Purpose effort at OPPD. So this aligns with our mission to provide affordable, reliable, and environmentally sensitive power to our customers. And the overall Power with Purpose effort is what is supporting our customer demand and load growth in this area. So the overall effort represents one of the largest renewable investments of this kind. So we're looking to install up to 600 megawatts of solar in the OPPD footprint and up to 600 megawatts of natural gas in the OPPD footprint. And really this is what is allowing us to retire some of our oldest outdated units, you know, specifically those around the North Omaha station that are reaching end of life. And ultimately it moves us towards our goal of net zero carbon production by 2050. So the Sarpy Southwest Transmission Project, what we're here to talk about, is ultimately required to interconnect the new Turtle Creek Station, which is the new backup natural gas facility right adjacent to the Sarpy County landfill, to the electric grid. So it's going to support, obviously, the load growth, both commercial, industrial, and residential load growth that we're seeing in the Sarpy County area and the surrounding area. So this is a regional facility that's going to help the load growth in Sarpy County as well as the overall OPPD footprint. But our specific project with the transmission lines is to build 3 new transmission lines that will interconnect to the grid. And really it is that will allow the capacity, the reliability, and the resiliency that that facility needs to feed into the electric grid. So we've got our project timeline up here. For those that have, you know, taken part in the routing siting public involvement process, we did from November 2020 through May 2021. We went through, and you'll see some of these maps may be familiar if you got some of our letters, saw the mailers, saw the postings online. We went through many phases of this project where we got customer feedback. We hosted these online public meetings, one in January and one in March, to really try to find what criteria that we use to route transmission lines is most important to the landowners in this area. So that was where we routed the lines. We announced that route in May 2021. And since then, where we're going and where we've been. So since that route announcement at the May 2021 Board of Directors meeting, we've been working through engineering, preliminary right-of-way activities, and some preliminary environmental activities that really helped us find from where we routed those lines to then where, you know, the alignments, which side of road, which side of property lines, where structures could be placed based on the physical features of the properties themselves. So obviously we're here today at the public hearing. Concurrently, we're working through procurement of some of our longer lead steel poles, and then we'll be coming up into easement acquisition and construction then shortly thereafter. And, you know, as we always say with these, all dates are, you know, we're trying to nail this down as best we can, but they are subject to change based on everything that we experience as we go through these projects. So I mentioned this before, and we do have a larger slide of this blown up. If you need to come read it afterwards, it's maybe hard to see here. But these are the routing criteria that we use to route transmission lines. So it's a large team made up of a lot of different subject matter experts representing the right-of-way coordinators over land management, environmental, engineering, and other stakeholders that really allow us to figure out from our landowner feedback in these public hearings which of these social, environmental, and engineering criteria are most important to our customers or our landowners in the area. Specifically the ones we hear the most are residences and homes, the proximity to residences and homes, proximity to places of worships or schools, proximities to cemeteries, but then we also get into that wetland areas and waterways and things like that from an environmental side. And then obviously the engineering is, constructability and cost are major factors that affect, both OPPD as a design and then the landowners from a constructability sense. We need something that is maintainable and able to work within the features of the property that we are going to be building these facilities in. So this is where we gain that feedback from that landowners, and that's what we're really trying to drive where these routes went, is based on these criteria. So with that, this is the map that you all would have received back in May 2021 and what was presented at our May Board of Directors meeting. So this was the culmination of really that 6-month routing effort of trying to find where are the best routes for these 3 lines that left our Turtle Creek station and then found their way to the power grid itself. So really when we announced this, we showed this very specifically in the center of roads or the center of property lines, because it wasn't until we were able to actually maybe get some more detailed engineering or environmental boots on the ground type research that we were able to really spot those structures on which side would be work best for the line and it is ultimately constructible. Which brings us to today. So again, as I was talking in the timeline, that was the decisions that were really worked out as a larger project team over the last 5 months, leading up to this public hearing today. So working with landowners on right of entry, seeing what physical features we had, that allowed us to really go and spot these lines, which side of the road they should be built, which side of property lines make more sense for the overall line as a whole. And again, this is not a process that we take lightly. We obviously have a lot of subject matter experts in the room with us that really allow us to hone in on what the best option is as the overall system. And again, I know those that are here today may not feel the same way that this is the best option, but we do try to represent that it was trying to take into consideration all aspects of effects that these lines may have when these decisions are made, and they are not taken lightly by any member of OPPD here. All right, and with that, I am going to hand it over to Mark to walk through the easement acquisition process.
Thank you, Shane. So again, as Shane introduced, my name is Mark Pohl. I'm Supervisor of Land Management, Siting, and Records here at OPPD. So as Shane alluded to, OPPD follows Nebraska State Statute Article 25, which is specifically the uniform procedure for acquiring private property for public use. This hearing tonight is to inform you as directly impacted property owners that OPPD will begin starting negotiations with you in approximately 30 days for permanent easement on your property. I'd like to spend a little bit of time tonight talking about easements, talking about your rights throughout this process, and hopefully answering any questions that you may have. For those of you in the audience, for those of you that are watching this online, that will be directly impacted by this project, you should have received a certified letter from OPPD outlining our intent with regard to a permanent easement on your property. In addition to the letter, there should have been a track map that specifically calls out the easement area and describes the proposed easement that is specific to your property. As an overview for those of you who may not be familiar with what an easement is, essentially an easement is a right of one entity to use another's property for specific use. So how that applies for this particular project is that OPPD uses easements to allow us to construct, operate, and maintain electric facilities. These easements also allow OPPD to access the easement area, as well as providing an ability to trim or remove trees to a safe clearance. In addition, the easements do restrict obstructions and grade changes that could potentially interfere with the operability of the transmission line. However, what I'd really like to note to you is that the easement area may still be used for specific purposes, such as agriculture, farming, grazing, landscaping, or other property development, whether that's residential, commercial, industrial development that does not interfere with the electrical equipment. I think it's also important to note that while these easements are recorded publicly with the Register of Deeds, OPPD does not own the property that's covered by the easement area. Property ownership is maintained by you as the property owners. OPPD just is granted specific rights to that particular area of the property that's covered by the easement. From an easement valuation standpoint, so with regard to this project, OPPD has hired an independent certified and licensed appraiser who's familiar with the Sarpy County area, in particular this part of Sarpy County, to establish an opinion of value for each property individually. Individual circumstances for each property are taken into account during this process to determine an amount that is fair and appropriate. We believe that hiring an independent appraiser allows for a process that is equitable and fair to all property owners across the board. As far as easement negotiations go, OPPD wants to make sure that all of our directly impacted property owners understand the rights that you have during this process. We are very intentional about handling our negotiations with you in a very fair and transparent manner. And you have our commitment that as we are negotiating with you, we are attempting to arrive at a mutually satisfactory agreement with you. Specifically, rights that you have during this process. As property owners, you have the right to negotiate with OPPD. You have the right to accept or reject any offer that is provided to you. Owners do have the right to be represented by an attorney if you so wish. That is not a requirement by any means, but it is within your rights to do so. You also have the ability to hire your own independent appraisal if you would like. If no agreement can be reached, you as property owners also have the right to have compensation determined by the statutorily outlined eminent domain process. Now, it's not my intention to get into that process in great detail during tonight's presentation, but if you do have questions about what that process looks like, I would encourage you to talk with one of the right-of-way coordinators at the conclusion of this meeting, or later on at a later point in time. We would be happy to walk you through what that process looks like. And then finally, per state statute, OPPD cannot begin negotiations on these easements with you for 30 days from the date of this hearing. We are happy to answer any questions that you may have about the process or any general questions that you may have about the project, but we do have to wait statutorily 30 days before we can officially begin negotiations. And while I'm on the subject of property restoration and damage settlement, I think it's also important to note on my final slide here that OPPD, in addition to the easement payment, OPPD will compensate you for any construction-related damage associated with this project to your property. This is in addition to that easement payment. These damages could be related to crop loss, they could be related to soil compaction, or maybe repairs to personal property that you may have, such as terraces, fences, or other driveways or features of your property. OPPD can't always necessarily control the timing of when this construction activity occurs. So we just want to leave those of you that are currently farming your property with the understanding that OPPD will compensate you for any crop loss associated with construction damage for this project. In addition, OPPD will occasionally require access to our transmission equipment for inspection or maintenance related purposes at a future point in time. And so if there are any potential future damages that may occur through that inspection or through that maintenance process, OPPD will also reimburse you for any property damages that would occur at that point in time. With this, I'd actually like to turn it over to Brian Wall to talk us through the construction aspect of this project.
Thank you, Mark. As Mark and Shane said, my name is Brian Wall. I'm a senior engineer in the transmission engineering department. Here to speak a little bit about the construction process. It's essentially a 5-step process with another final construction phase of cleanup. The first one would be prepare the land or land preparation. This is where OPPD and their partner contractor, essentially the construction contractor, would work to establish access to any vegetation removal locations and the structure locations, particularly the ones that are a little difficult to get to. We would ask the landowners, impacted landowners, actively participate in those access routes so we can limit damage, make it easy for everybody to get to and from the work sites. The partner contractor will remove vegetation at this time within the easement, including the stumps, if there are any. There's also a thing we call is a danger tree. That's a tree that lies just outside of the easement, but if it were to fall, it could strike the power line. It would be an example of like a 100-foot cottonwood 2 feet outside the right of way. It's obviously going to take down the transmission line. We would like to remove a danger tree like that. That will be determined by OPPD and then ultimately removed by the partner contractor. Some of the other topics of interest during this preparing the land phase would be fences and gates that either need to be removed, repaired, installed, maintained, erosion control measures, temporary culverts if necessary for access, any livestock management concerns that we would have to have for any grazing or anything like that. Planting and harvest seasons, obviously, that's always a big concern to work around those if possible. We do our best, but at times, that's just it can't be allowed to avoid those kinds of things. Another thing we would do prior to the real construction is what we call make-ready construction, and that's typically when we have to install brand new transmission lines, we have to sometimes go and move other existing facilities, whether it be the distribution lines on the side of the roads or the transmission lines, raising or lowering them. We call that make-ready. There won't be too much on this, but you'll typically see that probably ahead of the actual transmission construction. The first major step of building the transmission line is install the foundations. This is where the partner contractor will actually construct the foundation. OPPD will stake the pole locations. The partner contractor, I'm just going to probably say contractor at this point. They'll call Digger's Hotline or One Call, and they'll do the flagging and painting for underground utilities, so those can be avoided. The contractor would dig a hole, typically with a pressure digger such as this, set the rebar cage there off the right side of the screen. You can see the rebar cage, set that in a hole, fill the hole with concrete, and then obviously the soil that's removed, we'll haul that off in dump trucks. So this is where you're going to see most activity at each one of the sites. It's a lot of stuff going on during the installing the foundation phase. The next step would be basically erecting the structures, where we'll haul, spot, and assemble each of the structures on site next to its foundation. And then once the foundation's ready and the structure's ready, we'll lift and set the pole on the foundation with quite a few cranes in some cases. Here's some examples of the transmission structure that you'll see on these projects. On the left side is a double circuit 345 kV over 161 kV. On the right side, you'll see a single circuit 161 kV structure. These will all be monopole, single pole structures. Some examples of these structures, not that they're hard to miss, but the ones on the left side, the 345 or 161, in and around the I-80, Highway 50, and Highway 370, Highway 50 interchange, they're on the east side and some on the west side. So that's a place you can see what they would look like. The 161, there's a transmission line just west of Highway 50 or east of Highway 50 on the half-mile section line between Schramm and, let me get this right, Schramm and Capehart Road. So those, if you just wanted to see what some of them may look like, that's an example. They're also just kind of everywhere in the transmission system too. The last major step would be stringing the wires. This is where we basically pull all the wires in that need to be installed for the transmission line. We'll have some wire setups similar to this throughout the transmission lines. And occasionally we have to get a temporary easement for these locations, and OPPD would be getting that. It wouldn't be the partner contractor doing that kind of work. And then the final cleanup step is really, and I want to say that, that doesn't sound like we're never going to clean up. We typically clean up as we're progressing through all these things. We don't leave the right of way a mess between each of the steps. But there's always a final cleanup phase where we, restore fences, do some minor grading in case there's any extreme ruts, erosion control, either repairing or removing those. We might do removing construction, final vegetation debris. Also, and I guess at that time we would release any temporary easements that we needed to actually construct the transmission line. And with that, I think we're back to Shane. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Brian and Mark, for going through that. Just one comment I was going to add to Brian's final cleanup. So we do have a stormwater pollution prevention plan, or SWIP as their nomenclature called. So when Brian said that cleanup as we go, I mean, we are required to basically maintain any runoff, spoils from site, things like that. So we'll have an active plan on site. So at each step of the process, we're making sure we're stabilizing any soils that we do disturb, or removing those spoils immediately following excavation. So again, thank you for joining. We are going to start in here on our Q&A session live here. If you do have questions, obviously here in the room, raise your hand. We have several ways for you to provide comments to us. So in person here, we had the print copy that you all should have received. We'll also have a few folks with some iPads. So if you don't want to leave a comment on print and would like to write out your own, that would be another way to make that happen. And then those online, you will have a comment that'll be auto-generated once you exit the web today. And then obviously you can go to OPPD Community Connect, which is our live project portal for any information pertaining to this. And lastly, whether you're in person here, online, or on the phone, our OPPD land management team has a hotline, a phone number, and a mailing address. So again, landmanagement@oppd.com. Their hotline 531-226-3062, and then land management, which is at our 444 South 16th Street Mall, Omaha, Nebraska 68102.